Today in Conversations That Convert, we're going to talk about why builders lose sales to competitors and what they can do about it. And specifically, we'll be dealing with the fulfillment aspect or building the project and what can and does go wrong.
Welcome to Conversations That Convert. Every week, we'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes tackling relevant lead generation, marketing, and sales topics for remodelers, home improvement companies, and home builders. Conversations That Convert is brought to you by Builder Lead Converter, your perfect sales assistant. And now, here's Rick and Diana.
Welcome to Conversations That Convert, everyone. Hello, Diana. You look lovely today.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Diana. So what is our topic today?
Today is part 6 on how to follow through and how to let's say discuss about fulfillment. What is that, and how can we make it happen?
It's a little bit of an oxymoron saying, well, how do I lose a sale to a competitor when I've already got the contract done and now I'm actually building out the new home or the remodeling project? But of course, this is where things do go wrong, and this is where you get negative reviews, and this is what causes future sales to go to your competitors versus going to you. So we're going to talk about kind of the 3 primary reasons of where things can go off the rails and why builders get negative reviews and get labeled as a poor builder, and what you can do about it most importantly. So this is all about our series and why builders lose sales, and where we're at is you have signed the contract and now we need to fulfill the order. So we call this follow through and fulfillment. In other words, you promise to do something, build them a home, remodel their home. And so now you're following through with that promise and you're actually fulfilling the order. So I know it sounds like you ordered a pizza at a restaurant, but no, fulfillment of the order essentially is building the new home or remodeling the home. So I guess, Diana, this is a question, and I know you are all too familiar with it. Why do clients go from happy to angry during the construction process? And I know you've got personal experience with this. You're dealing with some of this right now, have dealt with it in the past. But we're going to ask you kind of your perspective as well, from your remodeling experience. And I know now you're dealing with some things with furniture. But how would you answer that, Diana? Like, why do clients go from happy to angry during the construction process?
I can say that it's very easy, because if you're not paying attention to the details and you take things for granted, then things can happen. So I think that's my answer. My sensation as a customer is that I signed the contract, and then I can't go back. So they act like they're taking things for granted, and sometimes that's annoying, because they don't answer the phones, they don't deliver on time, they are not saying the status of the project, and yes, some of the, let's say, negative experiences that comes to mind. But I'm amazed by how I remember only the negative aspects instead of enjoying, and because there were a lot of beautiful aspects and nice, let's say, experiences, but somehow I remember only those those builders and remodelers that are let's say not delivering. They're not doing what they're saying they're doing.
That's you make a really good point here. The devil is in the details, right? And
Yes.
and I think we've all done that, where we work so hard to get a sale, to get somebody to the contract point, and then once we have them under contract, we do say, like, well, we've got you, so now I don't have to have my customer service as good as I had it before the sale. And I think, yeah, that's human nature. We're all guilty of that. So I came up with 3 answers, which I think summarize a lot of what you said. But the first answer is, why do clients go from happy to angry during the construction process? Is unrealistic expectations. And I think it's as simple as this, is that if you as a builder do not set expectations, your client will. And every single client has a different set of expectations. So what might be just fine for you, Diana, is not just fine for me. Or maybe you're less picky than I am. And so the challenge is, if you're dealing with dozens of different clients each and every year for all your different projects, each of them comes with an own set of expectations, and then you as a builder are trying to meet those expectations, which maybe sometimes you can, but more importantly, what if you can't? And that's what leads to a downfall in the relationship. Now, the other answer I would give, and I think this is a huge one, is that the fear of the unknown. So that whole thing, Diana, we don't want any surprises, right? This is the contract price. We don't want any surprises. So after I get into the project, when I have these unexpected costs outside of the contract, that will take a good relationship between a builder and their client, and it will send it right down the toilet very, very quickly. And then the third one, I think, is poor communication. And what I'm going to say here is I'm going to call it reactive communication. In other words, you as the builder are only reacting to your client initiating communication. So what you feel like as a client then is that you don't know really what's going on, or your questions or concerns are really not being properly addressed. So Diana, anything else you want to add on to that, based on your experiences?
I can agree with everything. So that's amazing how simple it is to let's say to do things right, and how easy it is in the same time to not do them. So it's
And I think you made a good point. As simple it is to do things right, and the key to doing things right is you have to have a process in place, and you have to
right.
be able to replicate and duplicate that process. If you can do that consistently, like in other words, do the basics really well, you will be successful. And more often than not, in fact, 90%, 95% of the time, you will come out of a job with a happy client. You'll never be able to please everyone. If you're in business long enough and you do enough jobs, it's inevitable you are going to have somebody that gets let down. And sometimes circumstances dictate that. Sometimes there's things that happen outside of your control. It reflects poorly on you or negatively on you. And the client's going to look at you and say, well, it's your fault. And that's just part of the business. I remember, as an example, when we were building a lot of homes before we had a preferred lender, we were working with, I think at one point we worked with 50 or 60 different lenders in 1 year. And inevitably, what would happen is the job would get done, we would go to closing, and then the finance package wouldn't be ready. So who did the buyer blame? He blamed us because the lender they're communicating with the lender that they chose, and the lender is saying is, well, we didn't get this from the builder, we didn't get that, and that's why it's delayed. And so inevitably, it was something outside of our control. We did provide this information for them, but the lender fumbled the ball. So when we switched to creating a preferred lender and then recommending that preferred lender to our clients, a lot of those issues went away. So a lot of it is just being proactive and being diligent with being proactive. All right. So those are the three answers, I think, is why, again, the question is why clients go from happy to angry during the construction process. So what I want to walk through now is I want to walk through 3 fixes. What can you do today to reduce the amount of anguish, if you will, of when one of your clients goes through the fulfillment process? So what do you say, Diana? Should we jump into it?
I'm very curious to see if
All
there
right.
is a solution, a viable solution.
So fix number 1, setting expectations. There are really 3 areas that expectations must be set. First and foremost, we have to have a very thorough contract. So our construction contract needs to set the stage for expectations. And these are going to be the bigger picture things, such as, extremes. What happens in this extreme or this extreme or this extreme? But it essentially sets the table as to here's what you can expect as we go through this process. The second one would be the specifications. So once the specifications are built. The specifications need to be very thorough in two areas. Number one will be the installation methods that will be used to build the home or remodel the home. And then number two will be the products specified, need to be very specific. Any and all notes. So as an example, whenever I was doing specifications with the client, we would have lots and lots of pages. It was probably the most labor intensive task of working through the job, of course, in conjunction with the plan. But every single page had that client signature that they had reviewed it. So at the end of the day, if something came up, we could go back to the specifications, say, here's the expectations we set. Did we meet those expectations? And if we did, we could go back to the client and say, look, we reviewed this with you. You did sign off on this. They could complain, but they really couldn't complain. So number three is the construction process. What will happen during the construction process? And so in other words, what can you expect on a week in and week out basis? So all big picture things, but a construction process obviously is broken into phases. So we have multiple phases within each job. We have to set expectations for each and every job. Case in point, we had a homeowner's manual, and there was a whole section on the construction phase. And so whether it was excavation or prior to excavation, what would happen? What would happen if there was delays in the schedule, nothing was happening? During the framing phase, during the foundation phase, rough-ins, drywall, all sorts. We had a page of that. So as the homeowners would get to that phase in their schedule, they could see this is what they were going to expect during that phase. So any thoughts on that, Diana?
I think that's very important to have a process and set expectation, and especially speak about them out loud and clarify them with everyone, and then repeat them if necessary. So
absolutely, yeah, it's a good point, because our trades, we also would go through expectations with them, such as cursing on the job site, smoking on the job site, toilets, all this, just some of the basic things. But we'd say this is what we expect, and we would post those notices on the job site. And so we made sure that, hey, if you were a trade and you were working on our job, these are the minimum expectations of you. We'd oftentimes we'd have loud music and on the job site, and we had expectations that, hey, if the homeowner showed up, the music gets shut off, right? And you're not smoking in the home or on the job site. You have to get off of the job site. We'll put a porta potty, on each job site, and you're making sure you're using it, not a corner in the basement, as a lot of these guys would do. So yeah, it's very important. Everyone is on the same page. All right, so fix number two, dealing with unexpected costs. Now, no matter how perfect the job goes, no matter how good your process is, you can and will have unexpected costs. So I think the important part here is, how do you deal with those unexpected costs? Number one, I've done it both ways. I've done it where you sign the contract, you give people an allowance, they go out and make selections. The benefit to that, obviously, is that you can start the permitting process, and if you're quick enough, you can actually start the construction process while people are doing selections, and you can essentially cut your cycle time. The other way that we've done it is where the client makes all the selections up front before contract, and then signs the contract and goes forward. Now, I can tell you that after reviewing the pros and cons of each of these, it was always a much better experience for the client if the selections were completed before the contract, because then we did not go into the job with a bunch of allowances based on selections, and we also reduced change orders dramatically, because they would sign off on everything. And if you're doing construction or perm financing, you know how important it is, because you get that appraisal up front. There's very little wiggle room in change orders going down the road. So the nice thing is that the homeowner feels like, yep, this is signed and done. I think the key thing is that, maybe 6 months before those selections are installed, so people forget. So having a visual history of what they selected, and also having a really good interior designer that will reassure them that they made a good selection. So that's number one, with dealing with unexpected costs. an unforeseen circumstances clause in your contract. This is more, there's two areas that this really happens. Of course, with remodeling, you open up a wall, you find something you did not expect. So there was some additional damage, rot, some sort of issue in there, and now that's going to cause some additional costs on the job site. For custom home building, the other one that I found is that usually that we find soil issues on site. So we would dig into something, the soil was not correct, so we had to do some fixes to that. That could cause a big change in cost. But if you have a clause like that in your contract with unforeseen circumstances, you can review it with the client up front. They can sign off on it. And then obviously you get into that phase of the construction. You can go back to your homeowner manual during that phase and you can say, here, this is a potential unforeseen circumstance that can come up that could have an extra cost. So again, you can set the stage. And if you get through it and there are no issues, hooray. That's great. But if there is an issue, at least the client is expecting it. And then the third thing, I'd identify any and all items that could fluctuate in cost and create an allowance sheet. Now, this goes back to supply chain issues right now. Typically, things that have been fixed in price are no longer fixed in price, and there's a long order time. So what you think the cost might be when you order is different from when you actually receive the order. So these are just a simple, I need to identify all the costs for these in an allowance, make sure that contractually it tells the client these things could fluctuate, and as the costs are realized, I need to again go in and recap that allowance sheet. So Diana, what are your thoughts there with unexpected costs?
Here I can share from my experience. I had an interesting situation. So I work with some stone providers, and they offered me the price with plus 35% extra to cover the unexpected costs, and saying that you will pay the first payment, and then we will see what will appear on the job, and then in the end they said you will pay. We'll assume less than 20% extra. So they had the unexpected costs already included in the contract, and then the final. First, I said, "Oh, that's a lot of money," but when the final invoice came, I was happy because my mind thought that I was paying less, because they said, "Oh, we estimated 35%, but there were no extra costs." So, and then they even reduced with 5% some of the materials, and I said, "You will pay less than 40%." So it was a playful game around that. So initially I thought, oh, that's a lot. Why? How come that I'm paying 35%? I'm signing to pay 35% extra, and then the final invoice came with 40% less. So.
Yeah, that's actually a good way. That's a good way to do it, I think, too. When you can get away with that. We used to do that a lot with we were going into excavating, and if we thought we were going to have some extra cost, we would just put a round number in there like that. So whether it was 35% or just a fixed dollar amount, make that an allowance, and then when the invoice came in, we would recap it. And so oftentimes people are like, well, look, we estimated an extra $10,000 in costs. It came back in at $6,500. So you're $3,500 here, which will offset some of the overages maybe in other areas. And so absolutely. And it's being proactive again with identifying what the issue could be, putting a number in there, a number that's large enough that will cover most situations. And then when it's less, you come out happy. Yes. Versus if I said, hey, we're going to put in 15%, but it could be up to 35%. And now you're saying, well, I was expecting 15 and now I got to pay 35. Well, I want the opposite. So that's a good, that's very smart. It's like when you tell somebody how much more could it be, instead of giving them the small number first, you give them the big number first. So how much more could it be? Well, it could be as much as $10,000. It could be as little as $6,000. You oftentimes remember the first number you hear.
Right. So
you're thinking 10,000, 10,000. Oh, wait, it came in less than 10,000. So if I said it could be as much as 6 to 10,000 more, I remember 6. So it comes back in at 9, and you as a builder are saying, well, look, I told you 6 to 10. All the client remembers was 6. So that's why I like that 35%. It's like, oh, look, we didn't go over, and we even saved a little bit. So it's yes. Under where we thought it would be. So that's, yeah, another way to deal with unexpected costs. And I think the last one here is, how do you fix poor communication? And very simply, it's being proactive in the communication. So number one, you have to establish how and when communication will happen each week as it relates to the construction schedule. And I know a lot of guys don't want to give a full schedule out to the client, and I agree with that. I think if you give a full schedule out right up front, you set the expectations that the job will be done during this time. But if there's any delays with either supplies or trades, you've essentially, now you're going back and you're apologizing. So I like the idea of giving a schedule week by week with a anticipated closing date, but understanding that that closing date or completion date will change. So number one, how do I give that schedule each week? If you're using a tool like a Builder Trend or a Co-Construct, it's very easy to do. You can just show them what will be happening this week with the schedule. No, but number two is, as far as communication is, how should the client ask questions or report issues? Because if we don't tell them how to ask questions or report issues, if they've been texting us, they'll just continue to text us, but we may lose the text. Maybe they're calling us, but we can't take the call, or it goes into voicemail, we miss it. Maybe they send us an email. We don't want that. Maybe we want to have it reported in a communication portal if we're using like a Builder Trend. So we have to tell them, here's how you need to report the issue. And then of course we need to acknowledge that we received it and give them a realistic expectation of when we will get back to them with the answer, or at least with dealing with their concern. And then the third one is, and I'm big on this, is that you have to survey the client during the different phases of construction. So a lot of these construction schedules now, between when the sale is made and when the actual job is completed, if you're in a big custom home, it can be more than a year. So there's a lot happening during that time. And there's a lot that happens just to get to the contract through design, engineering, permitting, et cetera, and the sales process. So we need to be surveying the client at different times throughout that, because they may have had an issue during the sales process, or they may have an issue they'd be happy during the sales process, but have an issue with the project manager during the construction process. So what we do is we survey them, proactively survey them, and ask for their feedback. We want to create that feedback loop for not only positive, hey, where did we do well? Or who on our team really performed well for you? Because we want to know about that. Or was there a negative issue? We want to know about that too. And if we have a negative issue, then we can use that as a coaching tool for an opportunity to coach up a staff. But more importantly, Diana, we give you as the client an outlet. Because if we don't give you an outlet, what did you just say at the beginning of this conversation? I remember all the negative things. If we don't give you an outlet, you'll think of all the negative things, and now you go to Facebook, and you go to Google My Business, and you go to Houzz, and you go to any online platform you can find, and you post these negative reviews out there. And once that happens, you're done as a builder. There's really nothing you can do to recover from that, even if you're able to go back and satisfy the concerns or frustrations of the client. When they've left the review, good luck getting it down. So what we want to do is give them an outlet. If they have negative feedback, we keep that internal, we deal with it. But when they have positive feedback, when they're happy, then we incentivize them to push that review out to online platforms. So we have positive reviews out there to counterset any negative ones that we might have. Final thoughts, Diana. That's the fix number 3 for proactive communication.
I think that's very important to just keep it simple. Answer to the phone, just send an email in advance, or inform the client about the status update. So those are my frustration about those simple things. Status update, when you will deliver, when it's ready, and just I can understand that it's a delay, a week or two, a month, a year, but just say it out loud so that I can plan and know how to prepare myself. Just, it doesn't matter what it is, just say it out loud. Because other than that, I will think that you have some hidden agenda, and I will consider that I'm not important, and you take some other projects that are more important.
Very well said. You're right. And we do assume the worst when things aren't going our way. We assume that there is some sort of like I say, hidden agenda that you as a builder have against your client, which of course you're just busy or you don't know either. So sometimes you just have to call people up and say, hey, we're trying to get an answer for this. And as soon
Yes,
as we have an answer, we will let you know. You just
exactly.
have to, give them that update. So a status update when there's nothing to update is still a status update.
Exactly. Yeah. I have nothing to say to you. Yeah. Just say that. I have no updates. So nothing is happening. We are working to other projects, and we estimate we'll start to work on yours in 2 years from now. So just to let you know.
To let you know, we haven't forgotten about you.
Exactly. So I really appreciate the communication like that than no communication.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So very, very important. Thank you for your feedback, Diana, and as you continue to go through trying to get some things completed on your remodeling job. But if you would like to schedule your strategy call today and find out how we can attract, capture, and convert high quality leads so you can pick and choose your clients and jobs, go ahead and click that link below. Schedule your strategy call. We'd be happy to learn more about your business and see if we might be able to help you pick and choose those clients and say no when the job is wrong and say yes when the job is right. So for my brothers and sisters in Christ, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all always. We'll see you next time on Conversations That Convert.